Hello, everyone. Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening. Welcome back. Today, we're going to be starting part 14, I think it is, in the Essenes Children of the Light, written by Stuart Wilson and Joanna Prentis. And, part 15. We're going to read the first two chapters, and that will consist of 39 and 40. And part 15, we're going to be focusing on the Melchizedek. So it's titled The Melchizedek Heritage. Sorry, there's probably a dog walking by, and my dog saw him. Okay, so we start out with the Psalm from chapter 110, verse 4. So we've got the Melchizedek Heritage. And chapter 39 is simply titled The Order of the Melchizedek. And here we start out with a comment by Stuart. In July 2001, at the invitation of Anne McEwen, president of the Essenes Network International, I gave a talk at the network's summer gathering in Kent. By that time, it looked as if most of the research for this book had been completed. But even at that point, there were still things Daniel would not speak about. In the areas that concerned the Essenes, and only the Essenes, we had obtained a rich harvest of material. But in those areas where the Essenes overlapped with the order of Melchizedek, we could get no information whatever. It looked as if we were dealing here with shared vows of secrecy at the very highest level. Little pieces of information about the Melchizedeks had already come our way through the books we read as part of running the Starlight Center, and we were aware that the Order of Melchizedek was a powerful and highly secretive organization, which was said to have had members right across the ancient world. The references to the order in the Bible are quite brief, starting with this Psalm 110, verses 1 and 4. The Lord said unto my Lord, Sit thou at my right hand. The Lord hath sworn, and will not repent. Thou art a priest forever after the order of Melchizedek. Here, the identity of my Lord is not clear, but the later reference in Hebrews chapter 6, verses 20 is more specific. Whither the forerunner is for us entered, even Jesus, made an high priest forever after the order of Melchizedek. And it's interesting because the spelling in this verse is quite different from the way that we know it to be spelled. The curious thing about both these references is the phrase forever. How can any orders be forever if it is limited by the normal constraints of space and time that rule our lives on earth? The next chapter in Hebrews 7, verse 3, which describes the Melchizedek, king of Salem, enters even stranger territory, saying that he is without father, without mother, without descent, having neither beginning of days nor end of life, but made like unto the Son of God, abideth a priest continually. This makes it quite clear we are dealing here with a powerful, immortal, and ascended being. And by implication, his order belongs to God's kingdom and the realms of light, and thus transcends the space-time continuum, which governs planet Earth. In this context, forever begins to sound more rational. But the main question still remains, are there links between the order of Melchizedek and the Essenes? We had heard rumors to that effect, but that's all they were, just rumors. This was all very frustrating because a link between the Melchizedeks and the inner founder of the Essenes would have taken us into a most interesting area for research. The outer founders, the Kalu, were very well documented, but any questions about the inner founder were met with a consistent wall of silence. This had so discouraged us from proceeding that by the time I went to the Essenes network gathering, I was resigned to accepting the inner founder and the Melchizedeks as areas that sadly we would never be able to get information on through the regression process. By that point, we were ready to settle for the remarkable material that we'd already obtained. However, my time at the gathering convinced me that it was worthwhile making one final effort to break through this wall of Essenes secrecy. So when I returned to Devon, we prepared for another round of regression. Joanna asked Daniel to go back to the brotherhood as a whole and request that this vow of secrecy be released, allowing information on the order of Melchizedek and the inner founder of the Essenes to be brought out in what was to him future time. We emphasized that as our group was in this future time, there would be no danger to the Essenes in Daniel's time if this information was brought out. And furthermore, as humanity had evolved spiritually, we felt it was now appropriate. From that point on, it became much easier. Daniel succeeded in obtaining the consent of the brotherhood, and after his vow was released, we were able to access the information. Joanna, are you now able to tell us, please, who the inner founder of the Essene Brotherhood was? Daniel says, yes, my vow has been set aside and it is possible for me to speak of this. It was Melchizedek who founded the Essene Brotherhood. That is, the being who is known by this name in the Jewish tradition. There are always two names for any Melchizedek, and the Melchizedek of the Jewish tradition was actually called Aleph Es Melchizedek. The word Aleph is related to Alpha and means the beginning. The word Etz, E-T-Z, means tree, and the whole name means the beginning of the tree of Melchizedek. So the tree of life was planted at that time by this great teacher within the Melchizedek order. So now Joanna asks, or says, this is not the name given in many traditional accounts. Daniel says, I know. There are inner and outer names. This is the inner one. Many years later, this same teacher returns as Jesus, and Jesus is Elohinu Melchizedek. Elohinu is literally the glory of God, but it could also be translated as the divine creative flowering. Hence his name means the divine creative flowering of the tree of Melchizedek. So this great teacher plants the tree of life and returns again at the culmination of this whole process, when the tree reaches its full flowering. In that sense, Jesus can be seen as the overlighting and presiding spirit of our order, guiding and directing the whole Essene impulse. Joanna, and the Melchizedeks are found in many places apart from this planet? Daniel says, indeed, they are a universal order of service and work in many parts of the galaxy. According to the Kalu, they have made a major contribution to the development of consciousness upon this planet. Joanna, could you please tell us something of the qualities of the Melchizedeks? Daniel, the Melchizedek order is vast and contains a wide range of beings of different ranks and skills, but I can offer some opinion as to their chief qualities. First of all, I would say compassion, because that is why they are here to help us. That is what keeps them going, to solve so many difficult problems on so many planets. When consciousness is unable to move forward on any planet, then a Melchizedek will be dispatched to see what can be done. They are all like roving ambassadors of spiritual education and transformation, receiving and teaching the light. It is the light which really moves people forward along their chosen path, much more than structures, techniques, or ideas. The Melchizedeks also have flexibility and creativeness because they are dealing with new and challenging and difficult problems all the time. And on many occasions, there is no precedent, no rule to follow. I would also say they have detachment. Many of the Melchizedeks come from the angelic line, and much of their work is quasi-angelic in nature, in that they sweep away the problems at the lower levels in order to reach the truth, and connect with the ones they are trying to help with the light. In doing so, they penetrate to the heart of things and see them as they are, and not as they seem to be in this realm of illusion. They are also very tolerant because often they can be very far from their own planet or star system of origin, and you need to be very tolerant when you're that far out in the universe, dealing with a wide range of different beings. And I should also mention their sense of humor is very keen and well developed amongst many of the Melchizedeks. They need to be humorous and imaginative if they are to explore all the possible ways of moving forward. But there is one important thing I must add about this order. It is characterized by a complete and rigorous equality, and if you consider their position, you will see that this must be so. If you are a member of a service order that operates across the galaxy, then any prejudice by race or gender will just seem absurd. This principle of equality is seen at work in the group of female disciples around Jesus, led by Mary Magdalene and Mary, the mother of Jesus. This group of women, which included his sister Claire, formed an integrated and dedicated team. Many of the male disciples did not see the profound nature of the heart energies, which the female disciples were working with. Jesus could see this perfectly well, however, and that is why he had a special respect for them, especially for his mother and Mary Magdalene. And we did read about this in Power of the Magdalene, the differences in the group of women and in the group of men regarding the Essenes and the disciples. And if you take all of the disciples together, Mary Magdalene was the real star in that firmament, although many of the men did not enjoy being outshone by a woman. Joanna. And how did Mary, the mother of Jesus, relate to the group of women disciples? Daniel. Mary held the focus as the presiding figure of the group. As an advanced initiate with extensive experience of working with cosmic energies, she was able to help the group understand the greater framework and the greater responsibilities within the whole Melchizedekian system. These responsibilities unfolded over time parallel to, but quite separate from, the organization that sprang up to present the teachings of Jesus. I have projected my consciousness forward and investigated this, and it is clear to me that although the energies of oneness focused by Jesus could be received by anyone, some of their higher frequencies were largely transmitted from woman to woman over the centuries. In particular, the frequency of this energy, which focuses on peace and peacemaking, was transmitted almost entirely in this way. It was very interesting to learn as a woman. Joanna. So this was passed from generation to generation through the female line. Daniel says, yes, that is correct. Joanna. And was a lot of this transmission passed in the form of energy? Daniel also says, yes. He says, yes, that is correct. Joanna. And was a lot of this transmission passed in the form of energy? Sorry, I think I already read that. I had to pause because I heard someone at my door. Okay, so he says, yes. Much of it was passed in subtle ways beyond words, and it flowed like a great river from heart to heart down the female line. The beginning of this inner transmission gave the work of the female disciples around Jesus a special quality, a very profound and spiritual significance, and a deep level of responsibility. They kept the inner spirit of the Melchizedek teaching alive, and it was passed like a living flame of wisdom from heart to heart down the female line. I wonder if that's why I read this a long time ago. I read that women are more open to having awakenings and more open spiritually and intuitively, and I wonder if that has anything to do with it. Joanna. Thank you for telling us about this, Daniel. I think it's important that many know of it. And what can you tell us about the head of the Melchizedek order? Daniel. The head of the order is Melchizedek. That is, Melchizedek of the Melchizedek order. He sends out emissaries of light to many parts of the universe. His work is founded upon sacred geometry, and he is responsible for the development of the light throughout the universe. How the light, moving through the processes of spiritual unfoldment, transforms consciousness and reconnects us with the source of that light. In that sense, the Order of Melchizedek may be considered to be responsible for administering the gifts of the Spirit. Joanna. And the Kalu worked under the guidance of the Melchizedeks to set up the Essene Brotherhood? Daniel says, yes, exactly so. That guidance came first from Aleph Etz Melchizedek, and from that time there was a succession of Melchizedeks who held the focus, one succeeding the other, until the time of Jesus. There was always this central figure, this leader who held the focus, with a number of Melchizedeks working under his direction, and they guided the Kalu to set up the communities. The Melchizedeks taught the wisdom of the spirit, which the Egyptians called the Ka, K-A. That is why the Kalu are so named. The word means people of the spirit. Comment by Stuart. Even at this stage, we were learning things about the Kalu. Now we knew at last what their name means. The Ka component also occurs in the word Merkaba, which translates as light, spirit, soul, i.e., the light body, which, when empowered by the spirit, becomes the vehicle of the soul. Joanna, what would you say is the most useful thing you learned about the Melchizedek teachings? Daniel, the teaching about movement and repose. This was considered to be a key balance for any being with the physical form in order to maintain a healthy and harmonious life. Too much or too little of either destroys the harmony of the being and undermines the health. Comment by Stuart. The phrase movement and repose also occurs in the Gospel of Thomas, a text in the Nag Hammadi library. Joanna, and how would you sum up the work of the Melchizedek order? Daniel, I think the work of the Melchizedek order is about drawing the dispersed parts of creation back into oneness. That is why the Melchizedeks are sent to the areas of greatest separation, greatest conflict, because this is precisely where their healing and unifying talents are most needed. The Melchizedeks understood that despite the illusion of manyness, many beings and many levels, the universe is not divided in its fundamental reality. In this reality, which is the deep truth of things, the universe is integrated into oneness. This oneness lies at the heart of our brotherhood, and the whole of the Essene way flows from this central cosmic fact of oneness. And the origin of our deepest knowledge of oneness is the Melchizedek tradition and the work of the Kalu who taught within that tradition. All right, now chapter 40, which is a bit shorter than 39. All right, the way of oneness. And when we're using the word oneness, light, and spirit, just as an aside, always with a capital letter. The information on the order of Melchizedek was certainly fascinating, and there was one aspect that I wanted to follow up. Joanna, you said that the origin of your deepest knowledge of oneness is the Melchizedek tradition. Could you comment on this, please? Daniel, yes. I always thought the teaching about oneness was most profound, but I saw that it was also very challenging. The Melchizedek teachings tell us that creation began in oneness, began in light. And though we journey through darkness and chaos, we will return again to the light. So the journey of humanity is seen as circular, starting in the light of oneness, moving through all the darkness of this world, and returning to the light of oneness as we connect again with the spirit within. As Essenes, we believe that heaven and earth are linked together in the oneness through balance. The whole of our lives depend upon many balances, such as that of the spirit and body, inner and outer, movement and repose. Each side of these balances is dependent on the other, nourishes the other, and is sustained by it. The balance of inner guidance and outer fellowship is a good example of this. The stronger and clearer our inner guidance becomes, the more natural it is to share this with our brothers and sisters. And the more we share, the more we are encouraged to trust our guidance and to live our lives according to it. The two parts of any balance are like the two sides of a coin, facing in opposite directions, and yet closely linked. Thus, oneness is sustained by forces pulling in opposite directions, and yet these energies merge in effect to form a synthesis of joint action and united power. Joanna, and did all the Essenes understand the Melchizedek teachings on oneness? I'm going to venture to say no. Daniel, by no means. I felt the teachings sometimes had an uphill struggle, especially in the minds of the priests. In the training and focus of our priests, the Judaic element dominated, and although this was necessary and approved by the Kalu, I could still see the dangers in it. We talked about that in the previous chapter, that he saw them, the Judaic priests of the Essenes, as very rigid and closed-minded, but they had to be in order to sort of keep up this this kind of, what's the word I'm looking for? View from the public. They really had to be so careful. And yeah, you could see where that would cause some danger at some point and a lot of misunderstanding. The main danger lay in too narrow a focus, leading to intolerance and a tendency to exclude and reject people. The Essene priests, for example, could be quite obsessive about the issue of purity. Of course, purity is important to us, and we took it seriously. But I saw that excluding people due to impurity, rejecting and condemning them, was a dangerous process. And one that is difficult to control once it is set in motion. It led so easily to extremes, and I think our main complaint with the priests was that their positions were often extreme ones. In any extreme position, we lose sight of that balance, which is the heart of Melchizedek teachings. In the case of Jesus, because he understood the Melchizedek teaching so profoundly, he never took extreme positions and he never judged or condemned people. He might condemn their wrongdoing, but never the man or woman who had done that wrong. I think that was why the disciples felt safe with him. They knew that however much they erred, he would never judge or condemn them. He would often be strong in condemning errors, yes, but not in condemning people. In that respect, I thought he demonstrated the Melchizedek teaching in his life much better than our priests, because he understood it much better. In many of the scrolls beloved by the priests, there are strictures against the sons of darkness and all the doers of wickedness in this world. I never heard Jesus mention the sons of darkness at all. He focused much more upon light and the path to the light. The whole direction of his mind and heart was profoundly positive, and in that he reflected the Melchizedek teachers very well, for all their teachings are positive and full of faith in the triumph of the light. But if you think about traditional churches today, if they're not feeding fear, they're less likely to bring people back, if that makes sense to you. Those priests with extreme views were often driven by fears of the future of our order and our people, and their visions were often dark and apocalyptic. I preferred the light and the gentler, broader, and more positive view of Melchizedek teachings, with their deep roots in star wisdom and a knowledge that stretched out into the far reaches of the cosmos. To them, the universe was a known and friendly place, full of beings progressing in many different ways towards the one light. That they had worked and taught in so many places in the universe inspired me with confidence in their ability to guide us and their reliability as spiritual teachers. And here I think we end with a comment by Stuart. Oh, no, we don't. This is a remarkable statement, for it puts the Dead Sea Scrolls with their narrow focus and strictures on purity and the teachings of Jesus, which reflect a broader and more accepting tolerance, into a larger perspective. This perspective is illumined by Daniel's reference to the Melchizedek teachings, which underlie Essene wisdom. From his account, it becomes clear that Jesus was a more accurate presenter of these teachings than the priest scribes who wrote the Dead Sea Scrolls. Both form part of the Essene spectrum, but Jesus, through understanding and reflecting the spirit of the Melchizedek teachings more accurately, was able to draw upon deeper wisdom and set out a more durable pathway into the light. Daniel's remarks about the balance of spirit and body are also highly significant. In the West, we tend to separate the soul, which is seen as spiritual, and the mind, seen as potentially spiritual, from the body, which is seen as either neutral or even as potentially bestial. This perception distorts our experience and pulls us out of balance. It lies at the root of our alienation from nature and our tendency to pollute and despoil the earth. The Essenes, unlike many modern traditions which emphasize the spiritual side but ignore the body, consciously promoted a balanced process. Balance has a deep resonance for us as we try to reconcile the demands of the modern world with the needs of the inner life. Restoring the balance between the heavenly and earthly aspects of our being may prove to be an essential part of the journey into wholeness. But to return to the session with Daniel. Joanna, so you saw the path of humanity as a rising in consciousness into the light? Daniel says, yes. Our teachers told us that when we rise into the joy of expanded consciousness, we will look back and see our present level of awareness as small and limited, like the mind of a child. If we are to fulfill all our potential as human beings, we must surrender to the greater consciousness of the Spirit. We cannot do that if we cling to all the fears and limitations of the child self. We have to let go of this lesser self if we are to rise in consciousness and enter eternal life. Comment by Stuart. This passage reminded me of the words of Ann Hughes, a spiritual teacher who has inspired our group. In the surrender of the little me, the eternal I is born, and that's just the letter I. Joanna, you have told us about oneness and how it leads to eternal life. Did Jesus teach forgiveness as a way of moving toward these things? Daniel, yes. Forgiveness is a vital part of embracing oneness, and that is one reason why Jesus taught this. When you completely and utterly forgive someone, what they have done to you or those dear to you ceases to exist in your consciousness. It is not that you stop holding this event against them, but that for you, the event doesn't exist anymore. As it no longer exists, it no longer separates you from the doer of this deed. Hence, it is not an obstacle to unity. This level of forgiveness is hard to achieve, but Jesus told us it is a key to entering oneness, and it should be the aim of all those who follow the way. Comment by Stuart. We now live in a divided world where it is all too easy to think in terms of revenge and punishment rather than forgiveness and oneness. Unity and forgiveness are hard lessons for us, yet they are a key to releasing the past. Only when the past is released can we begin to live at peace with ourselves and with our neighbors. Many people face tragedy and trauma in their lives, and the use of forgiveness in dealing with these events is now becoming more widely recognized. Forgiveness enables us to reclaim our freedom of action so that a single event does not define our lives. New therapies are now emerging based upon this principle, and the books focused on it include The Journey by Brandon Bays. But to return to our session with Daniel, there were further aspects that we wanted to explore. Joanna, and forgiveness was part of the Melchizedek teachings? Daniel, very much so. Through forgiveness, the Melchizedeks constantly cleared their consciousness, so they were always flexible, balanced, and able to move forward. In this state, there are no obstacles to oneness. Joanna, I can see the benefits of focusing on oneness, but how can we do this amidst all the confusion of everyday life? Daniel, by listening to the heart, for the way of oneness is also the way of the heart. Even though the mind can be deceived and swept away by the drama of the world, the heart can see beyond this. That is why the heart, which is sensitive to the promptings of the Spirit, can lead us back to the one source from which we came. Through the deep knowing of the heart, the seeds of the Spirit, scattered throughout the universe, are brought together and made whole again. Then the universe, which was one, shall be one again, and all hurts shall be healed. Joanna, and why is this teaching about oneness so challenging? Daniel, because to apply it, to enter oneness, we have to let go of everything. Our past, our hopes for the future, even the precious little self that we cling on to so tightly. All this has to go if we are to enter oneness. But it is all worthless baggage compared to the treasure of eternal life. Those who experience the level of spirit encounter the deep mystery that embraces all in oneness. At this level, there is no separate self, only the joy and wonder of limitless being. Joanna, And your teachers taught about oneness as part of the mysteries? Daniel, of course. Oneness is the mystery of mysteries, where diversity dissolves into unity and many beings into a single, all-embracing state of being. There is a loss of focus as a small, self-contained, and separate self, but at a great gain of joyful life, which has no boundaries or endings. Comment by Stuart. This reflects the text of the Dead Sea Scrolls, which talks of eternal joy in life without end. It also sounds like a description of gnosis, a state in which oneness moves from a mere idea to the reality of a lived experience. And that's gnosis, capital G, N-O-S-I-S. All right, so we're going to go ahead and stop there. That is, I think, chapter 39 and 40. In the next video, we're going to read chapter 41, the diversity of the Melchizedek teachings, and 42, the triumph of the light. And then that will complete part 15. And I think I said there's either 18 or 19 parts to this book, so we don't have very much left. All right. As always, I love you guys so much. I thank you so much for joining me. And until I see you again, take care of yourself and take care of those around you. And I will see you for the last 2 chapters in this part of our book. Bye-bye until next time.